Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this YouTube exclusive for the Round the Ropes podcast. Now, guys, happening March 2nd down in Paulsboro, New Jersey. Belle to Belle presents Ring the Bell. I actually have it all written down right here, so I did my homework. And we're going to dive all into the show. And the person we're talking to today is the person who's behind all of this, the one, the only Melissa Sampson. Melissa, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you, John?
I'm doing good. I'm really excited for this. This is one of the interviews that I've been very intrigued by.
Thank you. And you could just call me Missy. It's
Missy,
what everyone
okay.
has called me since I was a kid.
Okay.
The only person that calls me Melissa is the IRS.
Gotcha. I was trying to be respectful.
Yeah, no, by all means.
But before we get into the show on March 2nd, and it looks obviously I don't think there's been any matches announced yet.
Oh, I announced all of them.
Oh, okay. Then I haven't seen them there yet.
We can talk about it. I'll tell you what they are.
Oh yeah, we'll get into that. Before we get into what's happening March 2nd, want to dive more into what got you into pro wrestling.
So the short psychoanalysis of that is my parents divorced when I was 4. I'm the youngest of 4 daughters. My dad had full primary custody of all of us. He also at the time owned his own business. So it's not like he had a lot of time to spend with us. But he used to like to watch wrestling. So he'd come home from work and turn on the TV and turn wrestling on. And I think in my psyche was, well, if I want to spend time with my dad, I'll just hop up here and get into what he's into. So it was because of my dad that I started watching wrestling and became a huge fan. And then, from there, it was the pipe dream I always wanted to do. And I just happened to discover that there were places you could go train. I had someone offer to train me and fell into it.
Now, where did you get your training?
I started training at a school called Hawkins in Philly. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was in a bad neighborhood. It was like a 2-car garage where there was always a broken down car in one bay and a broken down ring in the other. We used to have to weld the ring together before every practice. It was, but they taught me a lot. I learned a lot there. And then I trained for a while with former WW, at the time it was WWF, but female superstar Heidi Lee Morgan. And then I trained for a little bit up in Reading, Pennsylvania at the IWA Crow School.
So you're quite familiar with the independent scene then on the Northeast, to say the least.
Yes, yeah.
And how it is drama free, and all the promotions love each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with Jersey. Yeah, that can be a whole nother discussion in itself.
and I don't know how long your podcast is, because that could take a while to unpack all that.
But now, obviously now you're one of the coaches at the Monster Factory.
Yes.
How did you come across? And I mean, the Monster Factory is well known, especially in the Northeast. A lot of current WWE superstars went through the doors there. How did you end up finding out about Monster Factory?
Well, I mean, once you get in the business, you always hear of the Monster Factory. It was something I was heard of. I never went. I'd never gone. I had my last official match in November 2019, and then I decided to stop wrestling. Enjoyed a couple of months of not being in the business. But it's like the mafia. Once in, it's really hard to get out. And Danny Cage hit me up. I had met him one time, I think, at that point, at a New Kids on the Block concert, of all things.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah. And he hit me up on Twitter and said, "Hey, girlfriend, what's your phone number? I want to talk to you about something." So I sent him my number. And this was like March 2020. So right as COVID was shutting everything down. But also during the time of the Me Too movement within wrestling. So within an hour, Danny called me and he was like, "Hey, have you ever given any thought to coaching?" And I said, "No." And he had just brought on Ricky Reyes as a coach as well. Pardon me.
You're good.
And he told me that. And I said, "Look, I've gone to some of Ricky's classes that Ricky has trained at elsewhere. Ricky is really, really phenomenally good at breaking everything down to the most minute movement to teach it to you. I don't have that skill. Like, I'm not good at that. And he was like, that's fine. He's like, we all bring something different to the table. So I always say when people ask me, you know, how did you end up coaching at the Monster Factory? Danny Cage talked me into it.
Now, you know, since you've been there, like I said before, a lot of big names have walked through the doors of Monster Factory.
Yeah.
Have you coached any of those big names who have walked through the door?
No. Well, we have a guy right now currently in NXT. So referee goes by the name of Felix Fernandez. He wrestled as Sammy Miami for us. Okay. He was training at the Monster Factory when I started coaching there. I've clearly done some coaching with the Notorious Mimi, who went to NXT and then they sent her back to us. So I think those are it as far as who's gone since I've been coaching there. And those two were already well coached before I got there, so I can't really even take credit for that. So,
but you know, do you have any stories you can tell us about, you know, working with Danny? Because everybody always says, you know, Danny. Because I saw the Apple TV series, and I thought it was done well, and I didn't realize in the thing he was. I don't remember the episode, but there was one episode where he was training the guys on walking in through the entrance ramp.
Yeah.
And I never thought. Now, mind you, I'm coming at it from a fan's perspective. And yes, I know, you know, there's certain things that go on that a lot of people don't think about, but not when it comes to the entrance. I just figured, okay, you walk through, you do your pose, and that's it. I never knew that there was like a whole science behind it almost.
Well, you know, in our school where the Monster Factory shows are run, the entrance ramp is very short. Especially since COVID, we redesigned the building so they don't walk through the crowd anymore. They walk from the back through a curtain across a stage area that's maybe 4 foot, 5 foot long, and right into the ring. You know, but what he was coaching them for was our big show at the arena, where the entrance ramp into the ring was, you know, 3-4 times what they're used to. So he just wanted to make sure that they were all as prepared as possible for that show. You know, talk about telling stories about Danny. People tend to have really strong feelings about Danny Cage. They either really love him or they really hate him. I really love the guy. He's, we joke all the time that we're very close to being the same person a lot of times. in our sense of humor and the way we see things. He loves those kids like they're his own. You know, when him and his wife talked about they, you know, deferred their mortgage payments during COVID to make sure that the rent on the school was being paid so the kids had somewhere to go. Like, they're not kidding. They did that. You know, Danny's the guy who opens the school up on Thanksgiving and Christmas so that no one has to be home by themselves. They have some place they can go if they don't have family. You know, and he saw to it both of those, you know, Thanksgiving and Christmas, there was food. For Christmas, there were gifts there for people. You know, like, that's who Danny Cage is to me. Is he opinionated? Yup. You know, does he stand firm in his beliefs and opinions? Yes, and I respect that out of him. You know, are we hard on the students sometimes? Yes, but this is a hard industry. And that's what we're trying to prepare them for. I think he's a guy with a huge heart who genuinely cares about the human beings that come into his orbit and his life. And I think he, you know, deep down, he just wants what's best for everyone.
And I get what you're saying, because obviously as a fan, but also doing this podcast for the last 2 years, I kind of see it from both sides of the barricade, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to a lot of the wrestlers, and I see what they put themselves through.
Yeah.
That's why I've always said I will never. That's why I'm happy I chose the path I did, as far as being a fan, being a podcaster. because I would be the one to walk into a ring and probably trip going through the ropes.
Hey, it happens to the best of us. And if you happen to see black fur, I have 2 black cats.
And,
To get tail there.
but one of the things that I talk a lot about on the podcast is emotional investment.
Yeah.
And that, to me, if you're a promoter and you're sitting there and going to say, okay, we're going to put person A against person B, but there's no story being told. As a fan, then I'm going to sit there and go, okay, why am I going to spend $20, $30 on a ticket or drive potentially 4 or 5 hours to see a show when I'm going to just where I can just sit there and go, oh, okay, person A, like, to me, as a fan, I like when promoters have the wrestlers tell a story.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, every match should be a story, regardless of whether it's a long-term angle or just a story for that event. Every match should tell a story. I could tell you March 2nd, you're not going to see a lot of angles, if any, on Bell to Bell. Why? Because I want the girls to go out there and just show how creative they can be and show what they can do.
You bring up the show on March 2nd. It actually is a good segue to go into that show a little bit. We've seen women's shows being done before, but done with, I'm trying to figure out the best way to phrase this, with a man running it.
Yeah.
How do you think, with what you guys have coming up on March 2nd, it's being perceived differently because of the fact that it's being run by a woman?
Well, it's not just being run by a woman. It's being run by a woman who used to wrestle for over 25 years. I've got tons of experience. I know almost all the girls on my show. I know what they're capable of. So I think it's a bit of a little bit of a safe haven for the people that I book, because I know what it's like to be them. And I'm not, and I'm not just saying that. At one point in my life, I was them. So I think that helps them, feel a little bit more safe and understood in coming to work for me. And then hopefully we can translate that to, amazing matches in the ring that then makes it great for the fans.
Now, in the process of figuring out which wrestlers you were going to try to get on the show, was there a certain criteria that they had to meet, or what was the process like in picking some of the women who are on the show?
Bell to Bell was the name came from Gabby Ortiz, who trained at the Monster Factory, is a very, very good friend of mine. She's actually one of the people that suggested to Danny that he asked me to coach there. And she's someone I consulted with when the idea of me running an all women's fed was brought to me. And I talked to her about it, and, I talked to her, I talked to Kevin Kelly, I talked to Homicide about it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, these are all friends and people whose opinions I care about in the industry. And they all said to me, Missy, if anybody can do this, it's you. And I said, okay. Well, when I was talking to Gabby, I was like, now I got to come up with a name. And she goes, I always thought if I was going to run a women's fed, I'd call it Bell to Bell. She wanted both bells to be Belle. And I said, oh, I like that. I said, except I'm going to drop the E off the last bell and change the 2 to the number. So the abbreviation is B2B. So, yeah, so Gabby will be on anything I'm doing as long as she wants to be. But I started at home first, the Monster Factory girls. Why would I not? So, and then that takes me to Mimi, who I think is phenomenal. I think WWE dropped the ball with her. They signed her when she was like 19. They could have molded her. They chose to act like they didn't know what to do with her. And I mean, thanks for sending her back to me. I love you for that. But, she deserves to be there. That's a girl who will work, 3 shows, 4 shows in a weekend and show up the next day to training every time. She got released. She moved home. And like the day after she got home, I saw her in pictures at a seminar that someone was giving.
Oh, wow.
Like, she is one of the most self-assured human beings I've ever met in my life. She is mature. She just turned 21. She's mature well beyond her years. I mean, booking her for me was a no-brainer. And then we have some of the other Monster Factory girls, Stevie Brooks and Nevaeh Madonna, who currently train there now. Clara Carreras, who trained there for a while. Salem, who trained there for a while. So I started at home, right? These are girls that I watched progress, that I coached, that I know very well. And then we went out a little bit. It's no secret I booked most of my friends. Christina Marie, Ultraviolet, Rebecca Scott. For those that keep up with the happenings, we're champions at another all-women's fed that had been running. And things went bad there, and they bravely took a stand and vacated their belts and walked out of the company not because of how they were being treated, but because of how other people were being treated. And I respect that a lot. Like, a lot. Like, that was very brave of them, especially when, like I said, it's not happening to them. But they stood up for the locker room as a whole. And they're friends of mine. Again, I'm not going to lie. They're friends of mine who happen to be phenomenal workers. So booking the three of them was a no-brainer. Avery Jacks was someone who I had seen work a few shows, relatively new to the scene, but she's a little firecracker, man, and she just wants to work. And she's easy to deal with. So, that for me was a no-brainer. And I booked Zoe Cannon, who's a student of Jesus Rodriguez's, out at Three Legacies. And he's come in, the last 2 years for Monster Factory as our Christmas gift to our students and taught like lucha basics to our kids, because neither me or Danny are proficient in that. And that's his female student. She was ready to work shows. And if Jesus is going to vouch for you, I'm in all day. And then I've actually chatted back and forth with her a little bit online, and absolutely adore her. Adriana Mosley I met when I was going down to 1CW in Delaware. And she trained with them down there and then started working for them. Amazing girl. I love her so much. Her personality is fantastic. So I brought her on board. Tiara James was, again, another no-brainer for me. I had watched her work once. She filled in on a show that was being run at the Monster Factory, and I was there and I watched the show, and whatever it is in our business, she has it in spades. I watched her work. I was blown away. She came to the back and I told her, I said, whatever it is in our industry, you have it. So clearly she was somebody I wanted to get on the show, and was cool enough to agree to come do it. Don't want to miss Miranda Vinette, who is also a Monster Factory girl, trains at the Monster Factory, who's on the show. Becca Wiley is a girl from New Jersey. She was a huge fan, very passionate about wrestling. A couple of years ago, she came in and did the week-long kids camp at the Monster Factory, and she stuck with it. And she, has been training with Cheeseburger at the Worldwide Dojo and Preacher there. And, so she's someone else who I've seen grow. So I wanted to get her on the show. Vicious Vicky, I've been friends with for years. She's like the queen of New Jersey. How do you not book her? If you're running a show in New Jersey, it just sounds stupid. So I hit her up, and again, a friend of mine was more than happy to do
it. And I agree about whatever you're saying about everybody, especially with Vicky. And I'll say this much: with Vicky, I feel like she has probably made the biggest improvement, so to speak.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's right.
You're right. Yeah.
In the last
Especially
year,
recently, she's reinvented herself again, and I think she finally hit that knob into its right spot. I think she finally got that puzzle piece to land.
Well, the one thing with us when we do our weekly show is we always talk about independent wrestling. We're one of the few podcasts that we'll dive a half of our show into indie wrestling, and we'll dissect it like it's WWE or AEW.
Yeah.
And there was a show Vicky had done. Actually, it was Pro Wrestling Magic, one of the last Pro Wrestling Magic shows. And I said it on the show that her storytelling, along just with her character, to me is head and shoulders above most independent wrestlers, male or female, in the state of New Jersey.
I asked her to send me a promo for the show. And what she sent me was like a cinematic masterpiece. And I couldn't use what she sent me because she put footage from other companies in there. And I said, I don't have their permission to use that. You got to take that footage out. I can't use it. So she sent me another one that was still artistically done and phenomenal. But yeah, I mean, the way she's now clicking on all cylinders is phenomenal.
Now, I actually have the matches up here. Is there one? And a lot of times when I ask the question, the person usually says, "Oh, I'm looking forward to all of them." But is there one match in particular on the show that you are looking forward to?
I booked them. I'm looking forward to all of them. I mean, I really am looking forward to all of them, though. Like, you know, in their own ways. You know, like, I'll just start here. You know, the main event is Rebecca versus Mimi. And those are two phenomenal wrestlers who, you know, train hard, are really go-getters. So I'm expecting a lot out of that match. You know, Vicky versus Ultraviolet. Again, you know, two women who can really just get in there and tell a story and go. Salem versus Avery Jacks. You know, the good versus evil battle that's going to happen there. Claire Carreras versus Becca Wiley. You know, Claire Carreras is this high energy, spunky, you know, fiery Latina against Becca Wiley, who, you know, is scratching and clawing her way through wrestling, kind of the quiet, shy girl next door, and how those two personalities will juxtapose, you know, in the ring. Miranda Vinette taking on Christina Marie. That's like two hard-hitting women just going at it. I've got the tag match of Adriana Mosley and Zoe Cannon taking on Stevie Brooks and Nevaeh Madonna. Stevie and Nevaeh, I coach, I train. They're actually best friends. You know, so we'll see how that plays out in the ring. I think that's going to be really good. Gabby versus Tiara James. I think their size and style is very similar. So I think they'll complement each other well in the ring. So, you know, I'm looking forward to that one. And then, you know, I got Jenny Rose, you know, who used to work for Ring of Honor. Spent 5 years touring Japan. Hasn't been seen in a wrestling ring in a few years. Lacing the boots back up for me against Valerie Verman, who I think plays one of the best bratty, spoiled heels I've ever seen. So I think that, you know, technical, hard-hitting Jenny Rose against this prima donna princess, as she calls herself, is going to be a nice clash of styles that mixes well together in their presentation. So
that, you know, I wanted to just dive into a little bit with what you just said.
Yeah.
You don't see that a lot in wrestling now. You see it more on the independent level than you do up in, as I call it, the big boy level.
Yeah.
Where if you look at a WWE or AEW, you don't get the true heels. I always say that you have they're the cool heels.
Yeah.
And that I put that all on what the NWO did back in the 90s, but
yeah,
another day. You look at the independent scene and that's where you really get, like, yes, granted, you know, they're not true heels, but when the camera's on them or there's fans there, if they're a heel, oh, you know they're going to be a heel.
Yeah.
So the fact with that match that, you know, she comes off being the prima donna princess.
Yep.
You know damn well within probably 5 minutes the crowd's going to be chanting for Jenny.
Exactly. But that's why I did that too, you know, again, I put myself in Jenny's shoes. She hasn't wrestled for a few years. I know she's doing some training coming up to the show. But, I remember when I would get injured or I would have to take some time off, that anxiety about getting back in. So I said to her, I've got an opponent for you that will make it easy for you, because she's so good at being a heel that your job at being the baby face, the good girl, should be a cakewalk for you. But that's why I did that.
And like I said, I commend you for that, because like I said, you don't see that a lot
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
wrestling, especially now. Yes, it was different back in the 80s
Yeah.
and 70s.
And
but
I don't want to ruin it for anyone, but Valerie Verman is actually a very sweet girl. I tell her all the time, I hate that she's so good at being a bitch, because she's not one.
But that means she's doing her job correctly.
Yes. Yes.
But now, the last couple of questions I got.
Sure.
Are there going to be more bell to bell shows in the future, or is it going to all depend on what happens March 2nd?
I have announced and thus committed to 5 shows this year. I'm running every other month at the Monster Factory, 3 p.m. bell times. So that way the girls can go get double bookings. Fans can go see 2 shows in one day. If they're close enough, if their shows are close enough. That's why I did that. But I've announced 5 dates for the year. And thus I'm committed to doing those. Regardless of what happens. I've given up my vacation fund for the year. To make sure that I ensure doing all 5 of those shows. And then, I guess around the November 30th show, we'll see how everything's going to see if belt to belt continues.
Well, I guess that was going to lead into my next thing. If it ends up going, which I think it can go very well, is there a possibility we can see a bell to bell belt soon?
Yes.
Possibly.
Soon, no. You probably wouldn't see it this year. But if things go well, I would. The belt's half designed as it is right now, if I'm just being honest. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't put it in production until later this year, when I know we're going to continue forward. And then that would make either January or March is when I would go to crown a champion.
Now, you mentioned before, you have 5 dates, and I know, and we just went through, everybody who's on the card. Are there other women wrestlers on the independent scene who you are trying to get for the future shows?
That I'm trying to get? No. I mean, there's 2 people that, are not on my current roster page that I want to bring in, that I've been in discussions with. They both would require that I pay for a plane ticket, which the budget doesn't allow right this minute.
Gotcha.
So that's why I'm not publicly naming them until I'm sure I can do it. But I've booked girls for the first 3 or 4 shows are booked completely through, solid. And I've got girls who aren't on this show coming in. I've got Serena Vale, who is, I think, Romanian, from South Carolina. Nahir Robles, Harleen Lopez is coming in. Brittany Blake, I just booked. She put out a list of people she wanted to wrestle, and Rebecca Scott was one of them. And Rebecca Scott quote tweeted and said, "Please, someone book this." So I hit them both up and booked it. I said I can do that. I love Brittany Blake. I actually reached out to her to be on the first show. I texted her when I started booking people, and at the time she was in Japan. And when I went to Japan, I had a cell phone that would work internationally. She did not. So her cell phone was off while she was in Japan, so she never got the message. So I texted her, and I never heard back, so I filled spots. And then she hit me up looking for work, and I screenshotted the text and sent it to her. I said, "So I tried to get you." So she'll be on, later in the year. I've got KZT coming in. Karen Tran's coming in. Dolly Darko's coming in. I'm gonna forget people. But so I've continued to most of them are people that have reached out to me to inquire about getting work. And, I'm all for giving somebody an opportunity, and mixing in, keeping a steady base with some girls and mixing in, the other girls to keep it fresh.
Hey, like I said, I think the whole idea, because one thing with us, and I mentioned this to you before we started recording, the Around the Ropes podcast is a huge supporter of women's wrestling. So the fact that there's going to be a women's show done in Paulsboro, New Jersey, March 2nd, and we'll get into the ticket stuff in a second here, I'm definitely intrigued by it. And the opportunity to actually say that I can take off my bucket list in 2024 of coming down to the Monster Factory. Yeah.
Yeah. And all our shows will be at the Monster Factory.
Because, again, the Monster Factory, I said this before, or I've had this thought for a while. The Monster Factory is like this magical place that everybody talks about. That I'm like, as a New Yorker, I'm like, okay, Paulsboro is not, yes, it's a bit of a commute, but it's not that far.
Right.
But where can fans get tickets if they're still available?
They can go to Belle, BELLE, the number 2, Belle, BELL.com. We have general admission tickets available for $10. For $5 additionally, you can get the VIP upgrade, which will get you in for the VIP meet and greet at 2:00. You can meet the girls, take pictures, buy merchandise. If you don't get the VIP upgrade, the girls will not be out when you come in. At 2:30, they'll go to the back. And then at 2:30, we'll open the doors for everyone else to come in.
And I'm very appreciative that we were able to finally do this.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, I still got a little bit of this cough going.
Don't worry, I've had a cough since the dawn of time.
The season.
Exactly. But I just want to let you know the door is always open for you or anybody from Belle to Belle to come on. We'd be more than happy to have them on.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Before we let you go, where can the fans connect with you or Belle to Belle on social media?
On social media, it's Belle to Belle at everything. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. The best way to keep up with me is on Instagram. It's Wrestling Missy and the number 1. I'm hardly on my Missy Sampson Facebook page. I have another one that you hit me up through, which is Melissa, which is my personal page. If I don't really know you, I don't even approve you on that one. So Instagram is the easiest one to get, to really kind of stay up to date with me at.
Absolutely. And guys, it all goes down March 2nd, Belle to Belle. I had the freaking title. Belle to Belle, Ring the Bell.
Yes.
March 2nd, Paulsboro, New Jersey. Basically, just look for the Monster Factory. That's the easiest way to put it.
You say look for the Monster Factory, and I'm fearful that people are going to drive down the road and expect this huge building. It's a small building on what looks like a residential street. Your GPS will take you right there, though, I promise. You'll be driving down the street going, it's not here. It's there, I promise.
But Missy, thank you so much for hopping on with us tonight.
John, thanks for having me. Thanks for asking, my friend. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And like I said before, the door's open for you or anybody from Belle to Belle to come on. We'd be more than willing to have them on.
Much appreciated. Thanks, John.
Absolutely. But for Missy, I'm John. This has been Around the Ropes, YouTube exclusive. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube for more YouTube exclusives. We'll catch you guys next time.